chased by the deep state, fighting for independence, thinking about revolution, looking for alternative solutions. The enemies of the deep state will tell you what others even don't dare to think. Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski.
Hello. Welcome to our geopolitical podcast, DieGutenMenschen, Public Enemies of the Deep State. My name is Manuel Ochsenreiter. I am editor-in-chief of German news magazine Zuerst. And on the other side of the microphone is sitting Mateusz Piskorski in Poland. Hello, Mateusz.
Yes, hello from the bunkers against coronavirus.
It never ends. Do you have also the feeling when we start
yes.
podcasting?
I think that in several years we will also be talking about sitting in the bunkers, perhaps in different conditions, but still hopefully we'll have internet connection.
With grey skin, with very, very light grey skin, we will sit there and podcast about geopolitics while the continents are moving and maybe our world maps are not anymore accurate. I have no idea if it comes like that. That's quite possible.
Yes, and let's hope that after such a long period of isolation, our brains will be still working.
Today we have again an interesting topic, and maybe a part of the audience knows, since we both have a story in eastern Ukraine, in the two republics, that we were both considered as great supporters of separatists. We will speak today about separatism, but not about separatism in Europe or on Eurasia, on a very interesting topic, because we speak about separatism in the United States of America, separatism in North America.
Yes, every one of our listeners probably knows a lot about all those kinds of regionalist and separatist movements from European countries. Everyone also knows what has happened in Crimea, for instance, in Donetsk People's Republic, Lugansk People's Republic, but I think that we have underestimated for several years the theoretical outcome of deep crisis of United States. Still United States, as we all know, is a kind of artificial state, of course. The problem is that perhaps as it's quite young, there are no historical identities, regional or state identities in United States, which are so active and which are so strong in Europe. There's no the heritage of, local dukeship or local kingdom in one or two states, of course. Nevertheless, there are quite big potential differences between different states on several levels. Yes, so we are talking several times about let's say the main factors of separatism. In Europe, the main factor is usually the language one, the ethnic one, and so on. Yes. While in United States, it's first, it's quite similar to the Italian case when it comes to northern part of Italy. Those regions which are the richest ones. Yes, I guess proclaim some kinds of separatism. On the other hand, there's a deep cultural difference concerning the political views and even a kind of worldview or Weltanschauung of different American regions. Yes, and I think that one of the very best examples to discuss is what is going now on in California. The official statements of Californian Governor Gavin Newsom. What do you think about the potential of California becoming an independent state, Manuel?
Well, when we see the economic potential of California, when we see also that California is one of those US-American states with their own identity, if I'm not wrong, it's very normal for many people in California to see California not just as a federal entity within the United States of America, but California as a nation itself. And I think that is a very important term in that context, to identify California as a nation and not as a technical entity like maybe other US states define themselves as like a bureaucratic or in any terms more aseptic entity, while California identifies itself. And I think that is one of the main points, beside what you mentioned, the history, the language, and all these or religion maybe, these cultural implementations, that it is thus a people in a territory identify themselves as a nation, even if the people around them say you are not a nation. It's quite possible. So we have it in Europe with the Catalan, where the Spanish and a lot of French say you are not a nation, you have not, but there is the strong self-identification as a nation. And I think that is what we can observe in California as well.
Well, it used to be quite popular there to, let's say, organize some separatist sentiments in some special movements like California Yes, which has been created several years ago, and they have even announced that they are calling for a kind of referendum on independence of California, which should have taken place this year, by the end of this year. Of course, the movement as such was not so influential and powerful. I think that even its leader, Luis Marinelli, has moved to another country. If I'm not mistaken, he went to Russia, which of course raised some conspiracy theories by the federal media and federal politicians in the United States about his supposed connections with Russia, although it's not true. As far as I know, he's rather closer to the Russian opposition, to the liberal opposition in Russia. Anyway, nevertheless, now the level of California separatism, let's say, it's quite different because it has become institutionalized. The deep health system and economic and social crisis we were talking about many times about it is changing and, let's say, is speeding up some processes which would take several years. And I think that's why the governor, of course, the governor is a Democrat and a harsh opponent of Trump and his administration. Nevertheless, he announced what you have just told, that California is a nation state, which sounds, I mean, from the point of view of Europeans, particularly those who are not Anglo-Saxons, yes, it sounds as a declaration of independence or sovereignty. However, it's not going so far now for the moment being to declare the real independence, but still the governor announced that he rejects the strategy of fighting the epidemics taken by the federal government, that California is going to fight the coronavirus and the economic crisis after the virus itself with its own strategy, and that it's even going to help and assist some, not only other states, but also other countries, foreign countries, in fighting coronavirus, which means that we have quite an important element of sovereignty and independence in this, because, well, the Californians are planning to have their own foreign policy or trade policy with the outside world. Yes, do you agree that it's one of the most important factors?
Well, yes, this is this makes an independent country, of course. But what do you think? It sounds now like this independence movement is quite fueled by the presidency of Donald Trump or by the opposition against Donald Trump. What would happen if there is coming again a Democrat in Washington, moving into the White House with a Democratic president? Would that be then the end of the independence movement, or is it unstoppable, like what is starting right now in this context?
Well, on the one hand, there are several people and experts on the US politics who claim that Gavin Newsom, the governor, is trying to run for a federal level political career. And he, of course, now focuses on California, but in the future, he wants to become a federal renowned figure and to be active in the US politics. That's possible, of course. Nevertheless, I think that the bare fact that he has made such announcements lately will leave its deep mark on, let's say, the social consciousness of Californians in the future. Yes, and even if Newsom himself will stop and will tell, okay, I'm going to have a career in Washington in the future, to run, for instance, presidential elections in the future as a Democrat, still he has already ignited some ideas which were earlier promoted only by, let's say, small anti-system groups there in California, relatively small separatist movement in California, yes? And now it is becoming mainstream. I mean, on the one hand, perhaps he uses that as a kind of instrument for his own political goals. On the other hand, the results, the final results of such a rhetoric might be, long-term ones. And I guess that California, because of the crisis and depending on the depth of the crisis as well, has really a huge potential to become an independent state in the future. We have noticed, I don't know if you have heard about it, but it's quite interesting too, that the Californian governor has also announced a pact of Western states, which means that he has signed a kind of agreement that they are working separately with the two other states, which means Washington state and the state of Oregon, and which means that they are also coming back to the old idea of Cascadia. Cascadia was also a separatist movement when it comes to the northwestern states of US. Yes, so I mean the potential is great, I guess, in California, and even if you look objectively at, without any bias, if you look at the economical factors, demographical factors, do you know that California, at least before the crisis, would be the 5th or 6th economy of the world?
Yes. I was reading that. Yes, of course. So that would be, of course, for the United States a big hit if they would secede the Union. Yeah, if they would really do that.
Yes, but I think it would be they have tried before in the 90s. I remember that they were trying to organize such a thing in the Russian Federation. I mean, inspiring different regional leaders and even some people in the administration of Yeltsin. I mean, the liberals in the Russian administration, to declare the so-called parade of sovereignties, as they called it in Russia, yes? And I think that even without any external support from Russia or from any other country, the same thing might happen now in United States. In several states. Actually, I know that Bavaria, which is close to your heart, has good relations with Texas, for instance.
Absolutely, yes. And I, of course, I wanted to empathize that because I think there are when it comes to Californian independence, I think there are two very interesting political and geopolitical aspects. So the aspect number one is that this is an independence movement or an independence idea which sounds first of all quite reasonable. It seems practical. It is not a utopia. So it is a thing which can be realized in the administrative way. That might make it even more dangerous for the unity of the United States of America. We shouldn't forget this is not the first separatist movement inside the US. We had, I think it was first Malcolm X and later on Farrakhan, who were dreaming about like a black American entity within North America, like a black state. We had the same from the other side, from white supremacists who had this idea of the Northwestern Territory. But these ideas were more, they sounded more like a utopia. Yeah, like something to struggle for, to fight for, but not really practically. And I think this is one aspect that we have with the Californian independence and with the governor now, maybe not openly in support for it, but using it also as a kind of fear mongering against Washington. We shouldn't forget we had the same history in Canada with Quebec territory or Quebec state and whole Canada with two referendums, which were, I think, both very were both very, not very sure. I think it was like 48-52, like this. So we had it there also that the Quebec state used the instrument of separatism to get, for example, more independence, more rights from the central state. But the other aspect, which is maybe also important, is that when it comes to the United States of America, that the southern states, and now we come to Texas, the southern states seem to have a strong state identity. And that might have to do also simply with the historical fact that these states, or part of these states as territories, came in the 19th century to the United States. And it was always connected to wars. There was the American-Mexican War. There was a Texan independence war even. We shouldn't forget that Texas, which has also a very, very strong Texan identity, was, I don't know for how many years, but in the 19th century was for some years an independent nation state. So Texas first was parts of Texas were first part of Mexico, of the Mexican Empire first, and then Mexico. And then with a lot of loyal citizens, which were settlers, Anglo-Saxon settlers, but loyal also to the Mexican Federation or to the Mexican state. And later on went into the independence war, also connected that Mexico more and more tried to impose central state, taking rights from the federative entities. What almost no one knows today is that Mexico almost was disintegrated in the 19th century because also other parts of the country started very strong independence moves. And the Texan independence movement was a very, very strong one. And if we compare history, that's always very interesting. We see quite a lot of parallels, for example, to what happened in 2014 in Crimea. Just in a peaceful way. In Crimea was never a war between Ukraine and the Crimeans. So we have in Texas the same. There was the independence war. There was the independent Texan state, and then Texas joined the Union of the United States of America. We had also there an independent government. We had first more or less loyal citizens to the Mexican central government, which became more and more rebellious by the Mexican policy, which tried to oppress this identity. So, and later on, we had Texas as part of the United States. So I think that in the south of the United States, we have these identities much more present and much stronger. And that might help also this idea of an independent California. What do you think?
Yes, I guess the history of California might be quite similar to Texas history and the history of other southern states. Just to remind that they have a very short statehood tradition. In 1846, they had their own self-declared independence. An entity called the Republic of California. It existed for mere 25 days, so less than a month, yes, but anyway, during the war with Mexico, the American-Mexican War, they have a short period of symbolical, let's say, independence, and they have managed to create their own state symbols like the flag and so on. So they can still have some tradition within and some stories about what has happened in 1846. And by the way, after they declared a kind of presently we would call it an unrecognized state, yes, because no one has recognized the Republic of California at that time. Anyway, the Republic of California was actually conquered by US military units, which means that they also, the Californian separatists often compare California in incorporation, let's say, to the incorporation of the Hawaii Islands. Yeah. Which means that they still have this spirit. And one of the very interesting arguments of different separatist Californian movements was also an argument that California would be interested in more multipolar and peaceful external policy, and that Californians do not want to pay the price of aggressive policy of the White House outside of the United States. That was also, I remember, one of the arguments of their separatist movements. Yes. So, it's quite interesting because if something would start there, let's say after the collapse of state structures because of the pandemic crisis and the economic crisis following, we'll have a strong state which could be theoretically vehemently opposed to the neoconservative ideas which are prevailing in New York, yes, and on the East Coast. It's not we cannot compare, of course, Texas and California. California is, let's say, a progressist state, yes, when it comes to the cultural issues and so on. But just imagine if Californians, yes, would declare their independence, and if they would have a weapon like Hollywood in their hands, yes. So they might shape totally different image of United States as an aggressive superpower all over the world. If they would have one of their most powerful tools like Hollywood in their own hands. So anyway, I guess that really we cannot predict now what will happen, yes, but I guess that in the coming decades, years, or even years, we'll have a parade of sovereignties in United States as well, because we have already noticed, I think, that United States have gone completely bankrupt when it comes to the statehood that would guarantee elementary fundamental safety to their citizens, like, when it comes to health services and so on, yes? So that might be the beginning of let's say, of partition or creating something new at the beginning of creating something new on the territory of which is presently United States.
And another good thing, it would be eventually a reason to leave our bunkers to serve there as international observers for the independence referendum.
Definitely. Let's hope Californians will remember about us.
Yes, I hope so too. And another aspect which is also very important, the football world championship of the non-recognized states would become a little bit more interesting than it is now.
Yes, California with a population of around 40 million, I believe. Yes, so
half of Germany. Yes.
Yes, half of Germany and more than Poland. So anyway, it could create a good, let's say, representation when it comes to football and other sports as well. Yes, but I think they would be recognized.
Yeah, yes, I think so too, but of course not within the first weeks when the Abkhazian embassy will open in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And I hope we will meet there.
Exactly. Anyway, I think that much depends on the things with the Chinese-US conflict now. I mean, the future of US. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's why we propose to our listeners to discuss this topic, the topic of Chinese-US conflict and relations, in our next podcast.
This program was presented to you by Manuel Ochsenreiter and Mateusz Piskorski, the hottest dissident who won't violate any time the global rules against racism, extremism, or any other bad isms.